Enslavement was one of the worst things that could happen to you in the ancient world. It's hard to imagine what it would have been like. If you were sold into slavery, what was the best you could hope for? Was there any chance of escape or freedom? What was the worst place you could be sent? Well, we do have some pretty vivid descriptions of the worst places to be a slave, and all kinds of evidence that reveal what life was like for the exploited class, with experiences ranging from not so pleasant to death preferred. But let's be clear, even if you ended up in an okay situation, or I guess less horrific, the grim reality was this: you were property. You could be bought, sold, traded, or inherited at any time. As property, you had no property, and legally, no children or family. You had no rights, and were at the complete mercy of your master. This is called chattel slavery, described by one author as social death, where the slave no longer has a recognized existence outside of the master. And it was a big part of the ancient civilizations that many of us are familiar with. Let's uncover this dark and prominent aspect of our history as we reveal the experiences of ancient slaves, where they came from, how they were treated, how they resisted, and sadly, the worst places they had to endure. We don't really know when humans started enslaving each other, but the practice seems pretty old. In Hammurabi's Code, the famous Old Babylonian record of 282 decisions of justice inscribed on this epic rock thing, we find that slaves could be branded, marked with tattoos, or dishonored by having their hair cut, making their lowly status public. But in many cases, a slave looked just like the rest of the population. The famous Roman philosopher Seneca says the Roman Senate debated uniform dress for slaves, but decided against it. It would allow slaves to see how many of them there were, and more easily unite and rebel. Greece and Rome are considered the first examples in world history of genuine slave societies, where more than 20% of the population was enslaved, and slavery took a central role in economics and culture. In these societies, slavery was everywhere, including the monumental works of literature, philosophy, and religion that still impact our lives today. From Plato to the Bible, the topic of slavery is ever present. We have a letter dating back to the first empire in world history, in the Old Akkadian period, where the author requests 2 slaves for 15 shekels. It may have been a cheap price, since they were both young and beardless. So if 20% of the population were slaves, where did they all come from? Well, the most common source of slaves was war. In fact, Greek slavery depended on war, and since fighting among city-states was common, the supply of slaves was steady. Almost all Greeks shared the view that the winners in battle had the right to decide the victim's fate, and had complete ownership of captives of war. When people went to war, they understood that if they lost, they may become enslaved. Not only them, but their families, fellow citizens, and sometimes the entire population. The Romans also acquired many slaves from war. They actually had a name for it, sub corona vendere. Translated literally, it means selling under the crown, but it was actually an idiom for selling captives of war into slavery. As Rome expanded and conquered, its slave population boomed. Many hundreds of thousands of slaves came from the Punic War, the Gallic War, the Second Punic War, and the sack of Epirus. Slaves were also used extensively in war itself. The hoplites used them to carry their gear and supplies, and in the most desperate times, slaves were even offered their freedom if they would fight in battle. There were also bandits and pirates that would kidnap and sell people into slavery. In the biblical story of Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, Joseph is sold into slavery by his brothers. He is subsequently sold in Egypt. So what was the best case scenario as an ancient slave? Well, on the very high end, you could be a slave that was prized for expertise in a certain field. Skilled workers were sold for higher prices and presumably got better treatment. Some slaves were put in charge of their owner's assets for business purposes. This was called a peculium, and in that way, there came to be many wealthy slaves in Rome. Some would even joke that these slaves were richer than the senators. But the reality was, the master ultimately owned the property the slave was managing. If the slave grew to be successful enough, they might be able to buy their freedom, especially if they won over the favor of their master. In general, you had a better chance at manumission, or being freed, if you were in a domestic or urban environment. Educated Greeks thought repetitive tasks like grinding grain was beneath them and preferred to have a slave do it. You would probably fare better as the domestic slave of a rich man with a large estate than as an agricultural slave for a struggling farmer. And yes, even struggling farmers could afford slaves. In fact, if you couldn't afford a slave, in Athens, that actually meant you were poor. My income is so very small, and now I'm required to do these things myself, and do not even have the means to purchase a slave who can do these things for me. Only the very rich could afford dozens or hundreds of slaves, though. The ancient Greek economy was overwhelmingly rural, and large, wealthy farmers likely employed great numbers of slaves to work the fields. Pliny the Elder references someone owning 4,116 slaves. These people tended to parade and show off their slave count to impress people. If you were physically attractive, you may have been put on display in the dining room, or worked as a cupbearer or server. So not all jobs for slaves involved hard labor, but that didn't necessarily make the situation better. Expensive slaves were still slaves. Ultimately, your body belonged to your master. And abuse was likely common. Your children, if you had any, were also slaves. If a slave owner was the father, he could decide to acknowledge the child, giving him a share of the inheritance, or not acknowledge him, keeping him a slave. So if that was the best case scenario, you're probably wondering about the worst place you were likely to be sent. The gladiatorial games come to mind as a particularly awful destination for a slave, forced to fight to the death for the joy and entertainment of a crowd. But by the 1st century AD, freemen and soldiers were volunteering to fight in the newly built Colosseum, not just slaves. Warships with galleys full of chained slave rowers is another example of a horrifying experience a slave might endure. Both of these examples have been slightly glamorized by Hollywood epics like Ben-Hur or Gladiator.
Are you not entertained?
In reality, there were worse places. Whether you were enslaved by the Egyptians, Greeks, or Romans, the answer was the same. You did not want to be sent to the mines. All three civilizations had big mining operations at certain points in their history, and the consensus seems pretty clear that these places were the worst. Suffering was guaranteed, and death from suffering likely. One of the most horrifying examples is the ancient Egyptian gold mines in the eastern desert. In ancient times, metal of any kind was rare, but beautiful metal, well, that was practically worshipped by the Egyptians. The pharaohs viewed gold as the skin of the gods, so by adorning themselves with it, they made claim to their own divinity. Their wealth, influence, and power depended on gold. Aside from having a massive awe factor, gold was used to buy things before coins existed. It could ensure loyalty and strength. It could help fund armies. So needless to say, the demand was great. The oldest surviving geological map we have shows the location of gold mines in Egypt. In an amazing account, the ancient Greek historian Diodorus describes what it was like at one of these mines. He was borrowing in part from another Greek historian, Agatharchides.
At the extremity of Egypt, there lies a region which contains many large gold mines, where the gold is secured in great quantities, with much suffering. They are a great multitude and are all bound in chains. They work at their task unceasingly, both by day and throughout the entire night. The physically strongest break the quartz rock with iron hammers, applying no skill to the task, but only force, and cutting tunnels through the stone, not in a straight line, but wherever the seam of gleaming rock may lead.
Without modern technology, the tunnels had to be carved out by hand, and so the slaves were applied, with heavy stone hammers and whips at their back. A skilled worker would point out which rocks should be ground down, and women and children were forced to work as well.
The boys there who have not yet come to maturity, entering through the tunnels into the galleries formed by the removal of the rock, laboriously gather up the rock as it is cast down, piece by piece, and carry it out. For no leniency or respite of any kind is given to any, but all, without exception, are compelled by blows to persevere in their labors, until through ill treatment they die in the midst of their tortures. Consequently, the poor unfortunates look forward to death.
And so the labor of slaves in Egyptian gold mines helped in part to create the greatest empire the world had yet seen, not by building the pyramids, but by the mindless and torturous swing of the hammer in the mining of precious metal. Now, the next worst place to be a slave in ancient times is also the mines. I told you, the mines were the worst. It's no surprise that our imagery of hell actually looks pretty similar to ancient mine work. Think about it. Claustrophobic underground tunnels, unbearable heat, smoke and fumes choking the air, and the cruel whip of the overseers. It's almost literally hell. As I mentioned, both the Greeks and Romans had slaves working in mines, but I want to talk about the Greek silver mines of Laurion specifically because we have some really interesting facts about it. So first of all, the silver mines of Laurion are older than recorded history. Even in 354 BC, they were like, "These mines are so old we have no idea when we made them." They were originally used to mine copper, but in 483 BC, a massive, high-grade vein of silver was discovered. And just 2 years later, in 431 BC, the smallest estimate for the number of workers there was 11,000. The Greeks would threaten to send their slaves to the mines as punishment, a punishment that was almost certainly carried out. This is where slaves with great physical strength were usually sent. But huge mining operations also needed skilled workers and managers. The most expensive slave in recorded history is here at the silver mines of Laurion. The Athenian Nicias bought the slave Sosias for 6,000 drachmas. Most slaves cost around 200. He must have been an extremely effective and skilled manager. Like the Egyptians, the Greeks benefited greatly from these massive slave operations, and the wealth they generated gave some Greeks a life of leisure. Miners, prostitutes, and domestic servants were overwhelmingly slaves. In the 5th century BCE, the Athenians used the wealth gained from the Laurion mine to finance the building of naval vessels they used to win the war against the Persians. So with all the terrible things ancient slaves endured, was there ever any resistance to slavery? We know of no movement advocating to end slavery in the ancient world. In ancient sources, slavery is presented as a fact of life. Even with the rise and spread of early Christianity, which offered salvation to all, including slaves, slavery was not seen as a sin or morally wrong in any way. It was so widely accepted and ingrained that the Greeks could not even comprehend the absence of slaves. In one comedic play, the playwright imagines a make-believe land where women ruled over men. But even there, slaves remained in their roles. There are some Roman authors who do advise against the mistreatment of slaves, but usually that was just to make a point that abused slaves were more likely to rebel. If there was a law that punished you for hurting a slave, it was usually less about protecting the slave and more about protecting the owner's property. Slave revolts were rare, but they did happen. The most famous would probably be the one led by Spartacus. Spartacus was a slave condemned to be a gladiator, but he broke out of his training school in Capua with a group of followers and eventually recruited a large slave army. They won some battles against the Romans and held out for 2 years before the general Crassus wore down and beat the slave army. Spartacus was killed in battle, and 6,000 slaves were crucified along the Appian Way from Capua to Rome. That wasn't the only slave revolt in ancient history. There were two major ones in Sicily, and there was also one at the mines of Laurion. More than 1,000 slaves were said to be involved. Years later, they revolted again, killing the managers of the mines and plundering the region. A more common resistance to slavery was simply running away, but unlike slavery in the American South, there really was nowhere to run to, as there was nowhere in the ancient world where slavery was illegal. It was probably easier in that time to pretend to be someone else. We do know it happened a lot. No one wanted to be a slave, and the human desire for freedom is incredibly powerful. Even the richest slaves in Rome would all have been working towards the same goal: securing their freedom. The role of slavery in the ancient world can't be overlooked. Many of the great empires of the past, and present, if you think about it, were built on war, violence, and seemingly as a necessity, slavery. The metaphors in Western philosophy, literature, and religion are numerous. Stoics warn against being a slave to emotions. Christians are freed from the slavery of sin, and slaves are prominent characters throughout Homer's epics. While ancient slavery can't really be compared to the scale of the transatlantic slave trade that would come much later, it's interesting to study just how far back this practice goes. It's pretty shocking to consider just how long it took for the institution of slavery to really be challenged in a meaningful way. And the fact that the Western world's guiding philosophies and religion grew and thrived for so many centuries alongside the practice of slavery is tough to reconcile. Now, despite the prominent role of slavery in ancient history, there is one perspective we don't really get, and that is the perspective of slaves themselves. In modern history, we have figures like Frederick Douglass, who wrote about his experiences as a slave. But in ancient history, other than a collection of inscriptions and secondhand accounts, our sources come from the slaveholding class, while the slaves themselves are silenced. It is possible that some did write down their experiences, as there were literate slaves. We just don't have these accounts. Or we haven't discovered them yet. The exciting thing about history is we're always learning more about the past. With every discovery and insight we make, we peel back more of the mysterious shroud that hangs over the dark and perhaps not so distant past.